How's it going, guys? So, yeah, I just got back from the theatre. We basically made a day of it today. We went out to the theatre, we watched a few movies. The first movie that we saw was a re-release, actually. We went to see Wreck-It Ralph. That was a movie from 2010, which I really like, and this was my first time actually seeing that movie in theatre. So that was pretty cool. And we also saw two new movies, two recent releases. We saw the movie Bloodshot, starring Vin Diesel, which I want to talk about later. I'm going to review that one later on. Um, but first, I want to get this one out of the way. So we also went to see this movie, The Hunt. Now, this is a movie that going into it, I really knew nothing about. I'd heard bits and pieces about it online. I'd read a few comments about it and whatnot, but I didn't know anything about the plot or anything like that. I didn't even know who was behind the movie. And upon watching this movie and seeing the logos at the beginning, I found out that this was a Blumhouse movie. Now, when I saw that, I was just like, oh, here we go again, another Blumhouse movie. And I mean, if you guys saw my review for um my review for that other Blumhouse movie that came out recently, that absolute train wreck, Fantasy Island. And of course, if you saw my review for Black Christmas 2019, I basically covered it in both of those reviews. You'll know that Blumhouse, I absolutely despise that company. I think that they are one of the worst, if not the worst, movie publishers out there. Basically, they are every single movie that Blumhouse makes is nothing but cheap, lazy, poorly written, exploitative garbage. Which is made, like I said, it's made for cheap. There's no talent there, there's no passion there. It's basically just exploitative, cheap garbage. They make these terrible, formulaic, horror movies that just have all the same tropes. And basically, the people behind Blumhouse, in particular, I believe Jason Blum, his name is the guy that runs Blumhouse, has admitted on a few occasions that he doesn't really care about the art of cinema. He doesn't really care about movies. For him, it's all about politics and, of course, making a quick buck. That's basically all that company cares about. So when I saw that this movie was a Blumhouse movie, I immediately was just my expectations were at an all minimum. I was expecting this movie to be, just maybe a thriller, a movie that was maybe a psychological thriller with some gore, so that it was R-rated, that it was a movie that was pissing a lot of people off, and I didn't really expect a whole lot from it, but I at least expected it to be decent. But then when I saw that it was a Blumhouse movie, my expectations were at an all-time low after seeing that. I was like, okay, this is gonna suck. One thing I do want to credit this movie with is, for a Blumhouse movie, it's definitely not the worst I've seen. I mean, I'm not saying that this is a good movie. It's not. Okay, let me get that out of the way right now. This isn't a good movie, but for a Blumhouse movie, it's definitely one of their better products. It's definitely more entertaining, just from a filmmaking perspective. I mean, putting the politics of the movie aside, and the humor and stuff, or the attempts at humor, should I say, and stuff like that, and all the sort of political and themes that the movie was going for. Putting all that aside, just from a filmmaking perspective, this movie is watchable. It's somewhat entertaining. Now, as far as the plot of this movie goes, basically, at the start of the movie, a bunch of people wake up in the middle of the woods, and all these people have basically been kidnapped, they've been gagged, and put into the middle of this like big hunting ground, and that they've been given weapons and the means to survive and whatnot, and it's basically these elitists have kidnapped a bunch of people and are using them as game, basically, to hunt them. And it's revealed one by one across the story why each of these people were kidnapped and what it was that they did to sort of entice these elitists to choose them in particular. And it becomes very clear very quickly that this movie is trying to. It's what this movie basically is. Let me sum it up for you. Let's not beat around the bush with it. This movie is an SJW propaganda piece masquerading as a political satire. So it's essentially SJW propaganda in disguise. Now, when I came back from seeing this movie, again, I haven't really seen any reviews of it or really gathered the popular perception of this movie. I don't really know what the narrative is out there, like whether or not critics like this movie or whether or not audiences enjoyed it. But what I do know, just from a few comments that I came across here and there, is that a lot of people are divided on the movie. There's people who saw the movie and think, oh, this movie's a political satire that sort of looks at things from a neutral perspective, and it kind of shows the pros and cons to both sides of the political spectrum. Guys, look, that goes to show me, like comments like that go to show me just how, people have like a complete lack of self-awareness. People have no common sense whatsoever when it comes to this type of thing. Now, I've done videos in the past where I've talked about the importance of being red-pilled, the importance of understanding when you're being sold something. Now, to say that this movie is a political satire that sort of is trying to appeal to everybody, from whatever your political views are and stuff like that, guys, that's total bollocks. Okay, let's not forget this is a Blumhouse movie. Let's not forget that the people behind this movie are radical SJWs. Okay, let's not forget about that. And whereas it puts you sort of in the perspective of the people who have been kidnapped by the elitists, the right-wing individuals, the movie sort of trivializes the existence of these people. When these people get killed, when they get shot or when they get stabbed or whatever, it does it in a very comical fashion, and it's trying to be funny, but you can tell that I mean, the attempts at humor behind this movie, let me explain to you a couple of scenes. There's a scene where basically these two people who, the main character, this woman, and this old sort of redneck white guy, are in the back of the car of this supposed government agent, a guy who works for the US embassy. And of course, as you know, because it's very predictable, it turns out that he's really one of the elitists who's hunting them down. And they look in the back of his car and it says bribe money on a case full of cash. And I'm like, that type of just real ham-fisted, beat you over the head, try-hard humor is something that is hard to distinguish itself from this movie. Like it's hard to really see this movie as a serious. Is this movie trying to be serious, or is it trying to be just a straight up comedy? Because if it was trying to be a straight up comedy, it didn't work. Because there was no points in this movie where anybody in the theater laughed. People were bored. They they were bored to death watching it from start to finish. Almost every joke in the movie fell flat. And there's a scene towards the end of the movie where basically the main character, who's like this invincible, unstoppable, unnaturally tough, unnaturally intelligent, super duper ultra mega Mary Sue woman who nobody can touch and nobody can outsmart, and she can basically do anything and everything without explanation, basically. Everyone else is just a useless piece of shit pawn, but she's unstoppable. She's she's your strong, independent woman that every single Blumhouse movie has to have. And basically, basically, like, there's a scene where she goes into this sort of this big house where I guess the leader of the elitists is, she's going there to basically finish her off and gain her freedom and whatnot. And there's a thing on the wall. It's like a sort of a picture of every single one of these people. It shows that one of them is like a big game hunter. One of them is like a conspiracy theorist, like an Alex Jones type. One of them is at like a one of these like straight parades. I believe it says like "Stop being gay." The guy's literally like holding up a sign that says "Stop being gay." Again, everything is so that there's no subtlety whatsoever with this. It's very very ham-fisted, like I said, and it was very very clear to me that the people behind this movie wanted to make a mockery of those type of individuals. Now, granted, it does also make a mockery of some radical leftists. Like, there are a few scenes of some of the leftists arguing where one of them says, "Oh, you mean the black guy?" And they're like, "No, you can't say black anymore. It's person of color." And it kind of mocks like the Twitter Puritans and the absolute just insane radical leftists. But again, it does so in a way where it tries to make those people out to be very sweet and understandable, and like even the main villain of the movie, who's played by Hilary Swank, who's like this radical SJW bitch who planned the whole thing. in the end of the movie, they basically there's a line of dialogue where the character says to her, "You were just trying to make the world a better place, and these people made up lies about you," as if to try and excuse what she did to these people, but doing it in a joking and again, like I said earlier, trying to trivialize what these characters did. And to me, it just reeked of your typical Blumhouse SJW propaganda. Some of the comments I saw yesterday where people were saying, "Oh, this movie's edgy and it's gonna piss off the establishment," and "Oh, this movie's gonna be controversial." Guys, there was nothing controversial about this movie. There was nothing edgy about it. There was nothing ballsy. This is the same shit we've seen 100 times before. Okay, these movies play it very safe. All right, if this movie really wanted to be edgy and it really wanted to be counterculture and it really wanted to stick it to the establishment and stick it to stick it to the people in Hollywood who finance these type of movies, these types of propaganda pieces. If it really wanted to do that, then it would take a very, very bold stand on these type of things. It would absolutely just destroy this woke narrative, and it wouldn't be so on the fence, if you know what I mean. It wouldn't have all this ambiguity to it. It would be very, very one-sided. Like most of these movies are. Like, again, I mentioned a movie like Black Christmas 2019. That was a very political themed movie, and that movie was very one-sided. It was very SJW, very left-wing. All the bad guys are white. All the bad guys are male. All the bad guys are like Trump supporters. Has all your orange man bad jokes. This movie has that too, by the way. Like, I think one of the opening scenes of this movie is like a text message where you get a couple of orange man bad jokes, and again, this movie's just so ham-fisted. Right? It beats you over the head. I don't understand why people are saying that this movie's edgy and why this movie was ballsy. No, this was a typical formulaic, um, by the numbers SJW propaganda piece. That's all this movie was, and the fact that people lack the self-awareness to understand when they're being mocked, to understand when people like me, who are on the right side of politics, I'm a conservative. Okay, I'm very right wing. I know when I'm being made a fool of. Okay, I know I'm not a schmuck. Okay, I'm not going to watch a movie like this and think, yeah, they were seeing things from my perspective as well as their perspective, and this is a very neutral movie. No, there's nothing neutral about it. Okay, this movie was propaganda. This movie played it very safe, and I can guarantee you that this movie isn't going to age well either, because in a few years the themes and the political, just all the political shite with this movie will have been forgotten about, and the political climate will be very different. We'll have different people in charge. We'll have a new Orange Man, because again, the Orange Man bad shit will disappear pretty soon, and we'll have Democrats in charge again, and the left versus the right will go on, but it'll be different people, and there'll be different tropes and different cliches, and it just won't age well. In a couple of years, this will be totally forgotten about, and this one will just go off into obscurity, like every single movie that this company has ever made. Go straight into obscurity. Yes, this movie is better than the dozens of Conjuring spin-off movies with the jump scares and the CGI and all that crap. This is better than those movies, but that isn't saying much. I give this movie a 2 out of 10. I think it was very, very lazy, if I'm being honest. It wasn't as controversial or as edgy as people are saying it was. It wasn't edgy or controversial at all. In fact, it wasn't even that gory. That's another thing I saw about it, was people saying that the movie was gory and it was violent, and it was again, it was trying to be. If you guys want to see a movie that's like gory or violent, like real on the edge violent, go and check out movies directed by S. Craig Zahler or people like that. There are some very, very gory movies that are way more exploitative in terms of their gore and their practical violence and stuff like that than this movie. Yeah, there's a couple of scenes in this movie where people get their eyes stabbed out or whatever, or somebody gets blown up by a landmine and you see them, with their legs hanging off and all that. Yeah, there's a couple of scenes like that, but those scenes are very early on in the movie. And then after that, there isn't really much violence at all, and there isn't even a whole lot of action in this movie. And when there is, it isn't terrible action. but it isn't great either. I've seen a lot better. You know, there's a lot of like obvious stunt doubles and stuff like that. So wasn't impressed by it at all, and I give it a solid, you know, real 2 out of 10. Now that's all I can give it. So yeah, stay tuned for my review for Bloodshot. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching. God bless.